Hi there, my name's Gary and welcome to this weekend modular patch from scratch, how to do ambient type things. Weekend ambient, I think I called the first one. I suppose this is weekend ambient number 2. Very much aimed at, me just chilling out and relaxing, trying some ideas out, perhaps learning a few new things. As usual, there's minor module changes that go on, so you often move things around to help with the flow. I've got a few missing. My Godspeed's just had its MIDI repair, well, not repaired, but I just replaced it because it had a dodgy MIDI. I've got a low pass gate coming in here, a filter, an amp, so I can bring up external instruments, which I think I'm missing really. That's one of the big things I'm missing with modular generally, is that I can't bring my saxophones. If you don't know what a saxophone, it's a soprano. Clarinets, guitars, all the things I play, harps, even theremins, which is supposed to be electronic, but bringing the levels up to the right thing for modular is important. And even my electronic wind instruments and percussion and things, so that'll be great for that. I've got another VCA 2 coming in, a for 132 in that slot. I did have originally the Erica Quad VCA, but it didn't quite have the sophistication I needed, particularly with controlling the CV levels in the CV, controlling effectively the volume of what's coming in and out. So if I get another one, I'll have a Quad VCA set up here, which will be good. New from last time, I think, I've got a Micro Braids 2. So if you remember, Braids is one of the first sound wave things from Mutable Instruments, 13, 14 years old. But this is a sort of modern take on it from CalSynth, which has lovely sliders for timbre and colour. And the nice thing with these modern clones, I've got U-Burst up here, which is a clone of Clouds, of course, is that you can load on more modern firmware, which I think you can do with the original Braids if you've got one. But the original Braids was like this wide. It doesn't need to be, which is why these 8 HP ones are really nice. The learning, some of the things I want to experiment with this one is very much using lots of modulation sources, because I've gone a bit heavy on that now. So I've got the Oct and the Oct Expander with 24 LFOs effectively of varying flavors. I've added back in my 2HP LFO because I really like unipolar, and this is a unipolar one, whereas this is bipolar, unipolar, a couple of complex blocks, and then this sort of triggery one here. So to produce particularly ambient type things, or even dance, where you want the sounds to be constantly changing to keep the ears interested and the listeners, then you do need a lot of modulation at your fingertips. So we're going to experiment with that today. So the intro to the piece I'm thinking of doing is very much, I want to do something very flowing, lots of gaps, so I actually want to work with silence. If there's a module called silence, let's call this one silence. It's so nothing's playing, or there's something very sparse in sections. So one of the reasons I'm getting heavily into VCA CV control now is to really bring sounds in and out and keep them out for quite a while before I bring them back again. So that's something I want to definitely play with, just producing very sparseness. It's not really minimalism, it's just allowing sounds to breathe more so they're not playing all the time. I also want it to sort of phase in and out, as in sometimes there might be a big gap, sometimes there might be a point where everything's playing at once, so it's quite a big sound, and then it goes back down to sparse again. So experiment with that. In terms of the sounds, I want to try just the basic waveform from Braids, probably Pony as well. I think those two together would be nice, spread across the stereo. And then a bit of surface, perhaps doing some broken chords, thinking about that. Polycinematic, doing its chordal, it's got 8 chords that I've programmed into it or played into it, which I can access. So I might do a bit of that, and then perhaps some alien percussion, not rather than just a drum kit, something a bit different. So let's kick off. So Braids is, I think, currently in VCA mode. And what that means is I need to give it a gate and a pitch to hear it. Let's just see what it's doing at the moment. Nothing, because like I said, it's in VCA mode. So the way to use Braids is a top level menu, and I can check, for example, VCA's on, which means I need to give it a gate. So I'm going to trigger it, I think, with some of these. On PAMs, I tend to have started to leave this set up now for certain things. So, for example, gate 6, clock 6 here is set to divided by 6. The numbers don't match up. I hope they don't. Well, they do, sort of do. So that's going to trigger. I'll put that into the gate. And it's already got on the VCA, which is a built-in. So I'll turn it down so we can hear what I'm saying. It's already got decay set quite high and attack on that particular waveform I'm using, and it's being triggered, so it's actually staying pretty constant at the moment. I could change the attack, but I'm going to control the volume anyway with the VCA. So this will go into, say, VCA 1 here. We'll take the output of that back into audio 1, which is at the top here. So we need to modulate that. I'm going to use the top part of oct, which is a bipolar LFO, which means around a 0 point it goes negative, then positive. In the negative part of the wave, the LFO, it actually means it's going to be silent. So just to show you that working, let's take a pretty slow LFO and it's just opening and closing the VCA, the volume. It's like someone just turning a volume control, and which is great for the type of thing I'm after here. Pitch-wise, I'm going to use the Ornament and Crime, which is a great little multi-utility. One of my constantly used parts of it is the probabilistic melody, prob-melod, I can never say it right, probabilistic melody, which needs to be triggered. So I'm going to trigger it the same as the gate for Braids. And then it means it's going to pop out a random note, well, not random, but something I've preset here, into Braids. So every time it triggers, every 6 beats divided by 6, so every 6 beats, it's going to play a note off here. I also need to check probability. So at the moment this is set for 100%, so let's set it for something a bit less. So 80% of the time it's going to trigger a note and a gate. That combined with the rather wavy, that's obviously a triangle sine wave volume, means that it's going to be pretty intermittent in the piece. So probably the melody, the notes that are being chosen, I've already set this to about 2 octaves, and the notes that it's going to play are, you can't see this, but like a C, a probability of 10, so it's always going to play a C where it can, no Ds, E flat, it's going to be 70%, F, it's going to be 50%, it's hard to do this with without seeing what you're doing. I want to set A flat to be like 100% as well. When it basically this is it spreads these numbers of, you know, and then accesses them. So every time it receives a trigger, it will go, right, we've got a, you know, 100% chance of a C and an A flat, and then a 70% chance of some of the others. So that's how you get the semi-generative, and I suppose that's kind of what this piece is. It's going to be generative, not to the extent that, because some people think generative is you just turn this on and connect an audio output and the thing plays itself. No, you've got to patch all the sounds and all the filters and modulations, and then you've also got to say what notes you're going to possibly play in terms of a, and that's the probabilistic nature of it. So generative is very much, you know, you give the instructions to all of this, and it plays it back based on those instructions. There are some things you can buy which are more automated, so you just turn them on like a stochastic type thing, and you can just play with sliders and it will just do its thing. And I think even the Moog Labyrinth is a bit like that. You can just control a few knobs and sliders and it will play something, whereas this is a bit more humanistic in its approach. Anyway, back to the piece. So that one I'll do, obviously, with a bit of big reverb and probably filtering. One of the things that you may have noticed with that particular waveform is it's quite a bit of high end. So I'm going to connect the output of braids into this filter, which is handily placed next to the VCAs for a reason, and then a low pass out into this VCA to give us something a bit more mellow. And I'll probably modulate this later. I won't do it now because I want to build the sounds up. Right, the next one I mentioned is the Pony, and a similar approach here. I'm going to put the Pony into the next VCA. This is a quick one out of there into channel 2, pan at either side, and then again just a quick slower modulation to bring it in and out slower at a slower tempo or slower rate than braids. This is probably just playing a low. Let's hear it in isolation. One of the issues with, I think, the quad VCA is that it didn't have two controls, one for, you know, just outputting what's coming in knob, and then one for a CV attenuation. So that's currently what Pony's doing. So again, we need to give it some notes, and I'm going to use a, let's see what clock 7 is doing, divided by 15, probably use that one, into the trigger for a second probabilistic melody. This one's set to 5 octaves, the range, and the notes are kind of similar to the first one. And then the output from, sorry, the pitch information, pitch CV, goes into the Pony, which I'm just going to leave sustained, of course, because the the VCA is fading the volume in and out. And the only real thing I need to do with this one is give it some modulation of the timbre, because the timbre is this folding effect, and I want to have that automated in terms of changing the sound. So I think I'll use a slowish unipolar, and what that will do is it will just move upwards from this point and back down again, so I can set the base point on the folding. Hopefully you can see some of this. And that, note-wise, should complement braids on the other side of the stereo. So, need to just double check. Yeah, we will get some note changes, of course, because, oh sorry, well here's some of the note changes because the LFOs here are not synced at all to any of this. So as it fades up the VCA and these notes change because the gauge change, we will hear some note changes, which is not a bad thing. It would, you know, in some situations you actually want it to fade up on one note, fade down, and then change the note when it's at 0 and then fade up again. But this will do for now. The other thing, I've actually prepared some leads here, as you can see, so not cheating, it's just that I happen to, I've got the main rack over there, so I'll just grab a few. Because I knew this one, the ARP, so I'm going to use Surface now, this is number, if you like, Sound 3, is going to be played by this 2HP ARP, which is a great way of just getting quick broken chords based on a, you know, it's set to root C, so I'm just going to do C minor, 2 octaves randomly selecting. It's not too dissimilar from this one, except this one you can actually set intermediary notes like Fs and Ds and B flats, which you can't on that one because it's following an arpeggio, which is why it's called ARP. Anyway, so the pitch CV from that is going to go into the octaves of the Surface. The trigger for this, so we need the ARP to be triggered, we also need the Surface to be triggered. So I'm going to take clock 3 of PAMS, which is currently set to ×2, so quite fast. I think I want it slower than that initially. Let's go to divided by 2. And probability is the most important thing here, so it's currently set to 10%, which is kind of close to probably what I want. So this is basically saying 10%, there's a 10% chance that the trigger will be sent out here as it's going through every 2 beats. So that goes into the ARP, and I do, excuse me, get indications of when it's triggered, and likewise the same trigger, same gate is going to go into Surface. Now we just need to plug Surface in to hear what's going on. In stereo, I do always use Surface in stereo because I've got it set to a mode where it randomly moves between the stereo field with each of the notes. So let's just do that, see what we've got. And this is going straight into a stereo mixer here, so there's no volume control. So have we got anything playing? So this is set to one of the string models, on the main string model. Well, there we go. Alright, just for the moment increase the regularity so we can hear what's going on. We'll change it back later. And the 10% is obviously quite low, so we increase the probability we'll get more notes. And you can hear it's on a pure C minor arpeggio. So I can add the 7th in as well later on. So for the feel I was after, that's obviously too many notes going on, so I'm going to go back to a slower speed and a slower probability, or less probability. Let's see what that sounds like with the other 2 that we've already done. I suppose these are acting as a melodic bed in the mid and low frequency ranges. So that's the braids on one side, which is a lower sound. I might actually modulate braids now, the filter for braids before I forget. So into the filter, we'll have a medium speed bipolar LFO. On that side, that was the pony coming in. So I just want to hear braids do its thing. There it, just caught the end of it there. The decay on Surface, let me just feed this, get a bit anal about patching sometimes. If the patch leads get in the way of the controls, I get a little bit ADHD, or what's the expression? Irritated, I suppose. Right, so that's ticking over nicely. We've got surface going. To deactivate surface temporarily, I'm just going to pull the trigger out, which is the easiest way. I wish there was a little switch on there. Right, the next thing is more of a C bed, or a very low bed in the background, which may or may not, you know, keep going. So this is going to come from the Polycinematic, Modular, great name, Modular. I'll put that in stereo again. I do tend to like working in stereo. I know a lot of early modular, I suppose, was aimed at mono, and all the sounds were in the middle, and you use the delay and the reverb to spread it. Nowadays, though, a lot of modules do have stereo outputs. Disting the Polycinematic, this Surface, potentially Twin Waves could be stereo because it's got two oscillators and you can output them separately, and so on. Yeah, even the Godspeed, which is going to come back, has got a sub oscillator and two separate oscillators, so you can actually run three outputs from that one with a sub in the middle. And anyway, enough about stereo. So what we're going to do with the Polycinematic, we're going to trigger it, and the same as the Pony. So I'm going to take clock 7. I've got a free one there. I could actually take it from that end of the mult. This will be a bit nearer. So that's going to trigger a chord on the Polycinematic, the same as the Pony. In fact, I can have, see if we've got anything yet. So it's not quite playing yet. I often find this with the Polycinematic, I have to fiddle a bit before I get it working properly. So normally you should be able to press this button. There is something there, but I'll just make sure everything's set up. Yeah, so trigger, and then we need something to select the chords, and that is also going to be the notes going into Pony. So even though it's not going to play the same notes as the Pony, it's going to, because it's playing a range of notes, it's going to provide enough of a difference to trigger perhaps the 8 chords that are set up. So the Polycinematic, I've explained it before, you can program 8 different chords into it, and it will remember them for so they can be triggered. You just need to make sure that if you're doing randomy type things, that the volt per octave in, or the pitch CV in rather, is broad enough, and I've got it spread across 5 octaves here to trigger them all. So what we're getting there, I can also set the decay is, I'll just turn the, there's an internal volume setting for this as well. So it's definitely there. We'll just wait for it to come in every now and then. I'll balance it with the other 4 sounds that we've got. So here's the 2 notes we've already got from. Interesting, I turned those up. Neither of them were playing. And then we've got, oh, there we go. So that was the Polycinematic coming in, which is set to quite a flat sound at the moment. I'm going to just increase the overlapping waves, and straight away I noticed it really needs some filter modulation. So I'm going to put in a let's just try a I've got a more complex batch of LFOs on this optic expander, so I'm going to try that one, see if we can get an interesting filter modulation of the Polycinematic, just so it's not just going up and down filter wise, it's actually varying. So that was a bit heavy. I probably need a When I say heavy, I mean that the modulation effect was too much. I'm going to use an attenuator. This little attenuator thing just allows me, it's not, you don't go use it as in like a real time use, you set it and forget it, so that the filter's not going to be too heavily modulated. Oh, I know one of the issues with this. I've got the attack fully to the right, which isn't going to help. Right, that seems a bit fast, so I'm going to see if there's a slower, more complex LFO on this one. That's kind of nice. I'm letting the decay of the polycinematic and obviously the FX8 XL do some of the release of this to get together. There's also a reverb built into the polycinematic, so potentially it could have three things helping with this sort of long drawn out bed effect. I just need to balance it a bit. Right, let's see how those four things, so we've got braids, may or may not be there, we've got pony VCO, may or may not be there. There it comes. It's a sort of high clarinety sound. It is being timbre, sorry, the pony's being timbre modulated. Will do. And then put the trigger in for the surface, which I think the surface is going to provide the sweeter melodic component, because it's just stuck on a C-7 scale. So it's still on a probability of 10%. I'm just going to increase it. There we go. It seems to wait. It's kind of weird until I change the probability. Right, the attack of the polycinematic definitely needs to be slower. I don't want it blasting out, I want it to sort of fade in. At the end of the day, this is why you need a lot of VCAs, because in stereo I should have this going into a stereo VCA, so that I can use modulation again to fade it in and out. It was useful on the Erica quad VCA because it had, you could have them normal together, so I could have a modulation going into one and it would control the volume of two, or even all four, but this will do for now. Right, we're getting a bit of a flowy feel. There's probably too much going on. Remember I said I wanted some sparseness. One way to do that, particularly as a lot of these LFOs are controlling the volume of things and the filtration effects, to slow down the whole of this group of LFOs by using this rate control. That will mean there's going to be more time when it's all silent. Now if I can control the probability of surface, probably drop it back to 10, and also the probability of polycinematic receiving a trigger and pony, which as far as I recall that's on number 7, so we can jump on PAMS Pro, so it's at 50% at the moment. Let's make it even smaller, and the 7's running at divided by 15. So another thing for generating lots of, making it feel more complex, is that the triggers are spread, if you like, unevenly. You don't want them all hitting at the same time, so that's why clock 7's at divided by 15, clock 6 divided by 6, clock 5, which is not being used at the moment, and 5.3. In fact, we could make surface an odd clock, like divided by 2.6. That way there's no chance, or very little chance, of it regularly hitting the same as another sound. It's nice when it does happen every now and then, but it's also probably better if it is separated. Right, the final sound I'm going to do is sort of alien drum sound, and the best one I've got for that sort of alien percussion is, I just noticed the filter of braids is a bit high, is this Drum2, Erica Pico Drum2. So trigger in, I'm going to go from PAMS 4 and then output that into this mixer, which is going through the delay, which I haven't turned up yet. So this is going to make particularly the braids and the pony panned each side. It's just going to give them a chorus effect because they're not doing fast rhythmic things, of course. So let's bring up the delay, and then back to the Pico drum. This is coming from clock 4, which is divided by 8 with a probability of 35% at the moment, and it's going to sound something like this. And again, it's a chance. You don't put percussion sound, single hit percussions really through a VCA. You don't need to if you can if you're controlling when they hit. The other thing with this one, I really want to modulate the sound in some way, so I'm going to use a reasonably fast bipolar LFO. It's really to change the parameters. There's a pitch parameter there, and then a sort of shape parameter. I think it might be CV1. There we go. A bit more decay. Kind of want it to be changing frequency as it hits. And there we go, nice gap. That's kind of what I'm after, those big gaps. And then things come back in. And that's partly due to the speed of this. If I increase... Oh, there we go. That's the sort of thing I'm after. That. What would you call it? Synthy, glissando, pitch bendy sound on that. That'll do. It's just to add a bit of flavour. So that's looking good. I haven't had the polycinematic for a while, but that's not too bad because it is sort of overpowering. I could put the polycinematic on a infinite release, so from this point on it will just keep playing. And I might actually do that. I'm going to call that my 0 point, just the really background bed about there. We get nice low braids coming in because I did knock the filter back as well. That pitch of the Pico drum's not brilliant, so I'm going to fiddle with that. Again, a bit of distortion there. I'm going to turn the volume of polycinematic down so it's not over saturating the input on this mixer. Well, that's not bad on the Pico now. The thing with ambient like this is when you've got things coming in and out quite irregularly and slowly, you've got a limited amount of time to do adjustments. They're sort of in. You could increase the regularity by adjusting everything, but then you're losing, I suppose even as you're creating it, you'd be losing that meditative effect of creating an ambient piece like this. So yeah, Pony's doing quite well now. I'm making a note of the balance points because when I perform this, as in play it from scratch, from nothing, and then have some kind of narrative arc, you know, you'll be adjusting these volumes. They won't be up all the time. So one of the big things to change will be some of the surface sort of sounds. At the moment, it's back on 10% at divided by 2.6, so I might actually increase to 1.5. So that's the triggers, and then a probability will make it a bit more regular at the start, just so that when I make it enter, when I bring it in, it makes an entrance rather than just you know, just one note and then nothing happens. So not much I can do about the notes it's choosing, because this is, remember, this is a random selection of 2 octaves of C minor 7 here. I'm going to take it just back to minor for the moment. Right, so everything's sounding good. The only other thing I'll be doing is, turn this down a sec, is the U-burst clouds type of things. So clouds U-burst on here is basically when you perform and you got 4 controls for this top left knob. So that one's the blend. So when I go down to the left on blend, it basically means you're just listening to the dry signal going through. Well, it's not that dry because when it comes out it gets made very wet by this reverb. The second light up is the granulation stereo effects, so it sort of randomly moves the grains around because it's a sort of granulator. The third one is a feedback, to feed the grains back in on themselves to make it more richer, I suppose. And then the last one is its own built-in reverb. And so the effect of that is, if I turn this up to full, you can see we've got maximum grains in stereo, so I'm turning that second one down. The feedback I'm going to reduce a touch. And it's got no reverb, built-in reverb at the moment, because obviously I've got this one right next to it, but I can have a bit of that one just by itself. And then the balance takes me back to the ability to bring it in. So the things I'll be doing with this, as per usual, will be to have a bit of a mix of the texture and the sounds, occasionally freeze a section, which I've done there. Sometimes you have to wait for a bit of action, because remember we've deliberately built in some space into this. So what I'm going to do is modulate the position of the frozen section, or not even the frozen one, basically it's constantly you know, taking a buffer of the sound, and when you move the position it's sort of bouncing backwards and forwards as it's moving forward. So I'm going to bipolar the position, probably super slow. I'm kind of running out of slow ones. I might actually no, I'm going to give it a complex waveform. Let's give it this one. This complex one means it's going to be bouncing around more when I freeze it. Let's have a listen to that. So this complex LFO, it's moving around the frozen buffer and also the live coming through. So we're kind of ready. I could modulate, this is why you need modulation sources, because I could modulate the reverb, I could modulate the delay. I was going to, in fact I've got to go back to a standard delay on this one, because I'm not syncing, I don't need to sync delay this one, because there's no obvious clock, so I'm just going to, now we've got a bit of nice delay on that percussive sound, for example, which is playing a bit too often, so I just need to check its clock. Probability is currently at 35%. Let's drop it back to 25%, because you don't want too much of that, what should we call it, alien clock. That should do it. Yep. Right, let's just to check everything. I've got the trigger for surface. We're almost ready for a performance, and the bed is on infinite sustain. Sorry, the polycinematic is on an infinite sustain. So if I just take it off infinite release, so that'll be a nice starting point. Turn that down. Perhaps even bring it in on some texture as well. Right, we're ready to go. I'm going to turn the volume up. And ready to go. So hopefully there was some little tips and tricks in there, and possibly something to inspire. Who knows? It's always nice if you comment and say, I'm going to try that technique or something like that. It keeps me inspired as well to make these. So I'm going to go into performance now. These are usually 9-10 minutes, which is like a normal track for some people, or twice as long. I noticed a lot of people do like 4-minute tracks, which I can't do. I should be able to, but I particularly these long pieces, you almost want to leave it for a couple of hours, you know, just as a nice background. Flashing lights, that's what we need. Why are you playing? Oh yeah, there we go. Sorry, I just wanted some flashing lights over here because it's really important to have flashing lights as you're performing. Even though these two circular roto sequences are doing bugger all. I don't know why I like to have them going round. Right, so we're ready. Thanks very much for listening. Please like and subscribe and all the usual good stuff. Channel's growing really slowly, but if enough people like this stuff, then great. Right, off we go.